I want to play a few minutes of this man speaking. His name is Mossab Hassan Yousef, as you can see there, and the channel's name is Apostate Prophet, right? So he's a Turkish guy who owns this channel, who is now an apostate, right, from Islam. And the guy speaking, you can see it there in the headline, my father founded Hamas, right? So this man grew up in the Palestinian region and in that atmosphere, and he's speaking a lot of sense, to be honest. And I think this interview is well worth watching if you can allow yourself to move past the desire to side with one side or another, right? He's talking nearly in general terms about the violence, right? And he's trying to pick apart and isolate and demonstrate where this violence is coming from, right? So we'll have a little listen. We'll just put it on the big screen.
Not only Hamas, and why Israel today cannot allow Hamas to succeed or to get away with their crime on October 7, because this means that they are igniting the bloodlust in the entire Arab and Muslim world. And they want to just make it very clear to everybody that the Jewish blood is not allowed. And it's, the Jews are not there to be hunted for sport. This is not a game.
I'll just throw in there as well, because I'm obviously only picking a couple of minutes out of a longer conversation. And to kind of preempt the, yes, but what about the Jews? What about Israel? He's not denying any of this. What he's doing, or what he's attempting to do, is contextualize it. And he said prior to me pressing play that he doesn't hold anything against anybody who feels they're under an existential threat in how they protect themselves or defend themselves, or how, as he sees it, when you're surrounded by people who have been indoctrinated, as he's suggesting, into hating you and seeing the eradication of not just you but your history and your civilization. Okay, so I don't want this to get into but Israel did this, and then Hamas did this, and I'm not. There's nearly a bigger conversation around that, right? Because other than that, you're just playing the blame game. And when you begin to play the blame game, and you're revealing yourself to be aligned to one side or another, and that's fine, right? But when you have people that are staunchly aligned to one side or the other and refuse to move on that, you just see a continuation of suffering and misery that we've been seeing over there, right?
They are a significant part of the human family. Yeah. And it's not up to the Arabs or to the Muslims or Palestinians or Nazis or anti-Semites or people in the East or in the West to decide the fate of a nation that long for life. That is, and by the way, name how many nations are out there that actually lived for thousands of years. This small nation of some 15 to 20 million people are resilient to time.
I can give you one: the Irish people. And I think what's fascinating about that, particularly seeing the recent news stories of the Israeli embassy being just totally withdrawn from Ireland, based on the anti-Semitic, as Israel might view it, the anti-Semitic temperament flaring in Ireland, largely down to two factors: a growing Muslim population, and also the indoctrination of the students in third level colleges in Ireland. And he gets into that in a second, and this is very interesting, so I'll move on to that in a second. But what he's saying here is an absolutely sound principle for everybody, right? That nobody, and he uses different peoples and nations and religious groupings here, but it applies down to individuals as well. So the principle that nobody gets to decide or determine or to control or manipulate the destiny or the choices or the potentials in another person's life. and that works fundamentally fine on an individual level. And therefore, if you're looking to build off of that, ground up off of that, the same principles should be applied and understood between different peoples and different nations. Something that he's suggesting is absolutely being squeezed out of the innocence of childhood. He speaks about child abuse in this interview as well, and it's really, really interesting. I would encourage people to watch it. I'll put the link in the video or underneath the video, and I would strongly encourage people to watch it. It's great stuff.
5,000 years of evolution. And they maintain to stay a small minority throughout the centuries against so many attempts to annihilate them. And they survived. It's
Again, look at the parallels between the Irish people and the Israeli people, the Israeli nation, regardless of what your take is on it. There's parallels to be drawn there. And again, regardless of certain similar parallels, the underlying principle that each people and each individual should be free to determine their own nature based on their own free will choices, right? That's a great principle and a great taking from this.
It's a miracle. Israel is a miracle, the biggest miracle of all time.
It is very, very accurate.
And to just dedicate one's life to annihilate such people, for what? Why don't you get inspired by these people? Exactly. Why don't you learn something from them and their resilience? They are the symbol of life against so many odds. And yes, if you allow Hamas and other savages, even if you allow some newly indoctrinated Americans to harass the Jewish people, to abuse the Jewish people, things will develop very, very fast, and it becomes a Holocaust again. Mm-hmm.
Fascinating, and you can see this in not just Ireland. So he cites there the American the indoctrinated American student, right, college student or university student, and it's interesting to see that the same sort of patterns or the same sort of ideology, the same sort of psychology is being grown, fostered, and unleashed from third level universities, right? And it is, he'll speak about it now in a second, and so I'll leave him get to it, and then we'll come back.
And this is what we have been warning from the beginning of the war. Now with the social media transcending all the political borders and invading the Americans at home and at campuses, dividing the country, spreading hateful ideology based on the victim narrative, where within no time they started as anti-war activists. Now then they became pro-Palestine, then suddenly became anti-Israel, then now they are becoming Nazis. Yeah. And this is in less than a year. Mm-hmm.
And for anyone following, you can see the development and the evolution, the morphing of college students from the nearly like a hippie style, everyone's individual choices and everyone's individual lifestyle needs to be catered to. And if you're not accepting freely of what other people have chosen to do in their life, then you're trying to oppress them. And it moved from that, as he's saying, into siding with other peoples you find to be oppressed, like Native Americans or Aboriginals, never your own people, strangely, right? Or Palestinians in this instance, or the Ukrainians, right? But never your own people. And then from that into the Jews are the problem with everything, right? So when people ask, how could the left, who are for the oppressed minorities, like they're for gay rights, they're for transgender rights, whatever them things are, right? Distinct from just basic human rights. The left champions these causes, but also champions the introduction of Islam into these countries and the battling against the oppression of these minorities, in this case Islam or Muslims, right? People see that and say that's incoherent. Where is that coming from? Why, when both of the minorities, or some of the minorities that these people are championing, are totally antagonistic fundamentally with each other, right? They're not principally aligned in any ideological sense beyond the, or to the point of their own psychology, which is essentially the West has become viewed through the Western natives as historically an oppressive system, an oppressive civilization. Therefore, it needs to be beaten down and deconstructed so it is more agreeable to external influences, i.e., Islam, right? So you can see that Islam, whether there's massive funding going into these sort of colleges and ideologies or lecturers or whatever the case is, or media, or whether it's just Islam instinctively taking advantage of the flawed thinking of native Western people, you get the same outcome. You get college students and left-leaning, what counts for left-leaning people today, working hand in glove with Islamic people, with Muslims, right? And what happens as a result of that? You get the spread of Islam, which will lead to a theocracy, which will destroy all minorities in this in civilization, because it doesn't allow for anything other than a one distinctive worldview, right? And I suppose in the left's perspective, right, or that sort of that worldview, where you are operating out of an oppressor and the oppressed, the ultimate goal, at least on paper, is to have the acceptance of all minorities to the point of them not being viewed as minorities. Society has become equalized. Islam will absolutely do that. It'll cement that for you because it doesn't allow for any distinctive worldviews, right? So it can be seen as an end goal that is worthy of pursuing because it eliminates minorities, not just ideologically, right? So again, I'd recommend people go and watch this because there's big conversations needed around this sort of stuff.